But I guess, hi everyone. My name is Trang Nguyen. I'm the fundraising manager at Transparency International Secretariat based in Berlin. And just maybe before we start, a few housekeeping items to go over. If you could kindly rename yourself to include your organizational affiliation, that would be much appreciated. You can do that just by clicking more beside your name and choosing the rename option. And then also, if you could just kindly mute yourself unless you are speaking. And if you have any questions, then feel free to add them into the chat or raise your hand there's a button at the bottom of your screen. And then finally, if you'd like to engage with us in this conversation online, feel free to connect with us via our Twitter handles, which will be posted in the chat. And just also for your information that this session is being recorded. So we have a few more people that have joined us. So I think we'll get started because time goes by very quickly. So first of all, we are delighted to welcome you to this session on core pillars of good transnational partnerships that Transparency International Secretariat is hosting jointly with our Lebanese chapter, Lebanese Transparency Association, Saferworld, which is based in the UK, and Al Ayam Center for Cultural Studies and Development, based in Sudan. And before we start, we'd like to launch a quick Zoom poll to find out what type of organization you are affiliated with. So if you could launch that poll, great. And we can just answer quickly. That's great. Okay. So I'll just let this poll run, and then Tylee, you can show us the results afterwards. But the purpose of our session today is to really reflect on critical success factors of transnational partnerships that enable effective locally led responses. I know there's been a lot of sessions today that have already started reflecting on this, and we also recognize that there are a lot of important commitments that have been made in the humanitarian development sector towards localization, and that there are many ongoing initiatives to reimagine the role of INGOs in global civil society. To that effect, you know, we are seeing how it impacts our own ways of working, from funding, from advocacy, communications, programming, all areas of work. But really, it does require, you know, an organizational change and commitment. And so we welcome the shifts that have been occurring and continue to occur, but we also recognize that progress remains limited. And that's why we want to engage in a conversation with you today, to understand what still needs to change in order to equilibrate power in transnational partnerships. So let me just see, do we have the results? Oh, I only see 2. Tylee, I'm not sure if I'm seeing the results correctly, but it's like,
yeah,
anyways, I see 2
only
there.
2 answered.
So let's see if anyone else joined. Just for you to know, we come to this conversation with humility and a desire to learn and change. And we don't have all the answers. We're still learning ourselves, but we want to share our own experiences through 2 case studies of transnational partnerships that have aimed to shift power and ensure decision-making and resources are with people affected by crises and conflict, who can and do design what they need. And with that, we hope to hear from you and also learn from you based on your own experiences in terms of what you've seen as critical success factors and what still needs to change, and what are the resources that we need in order to continue to make our partnerships more responsive and adaptive to local needs. So I will now start with our first case study. So that is about Transparency International and LTA. And I'm delighted to welcome my colleague here, Sarah Gabriel. who is speaking on behalf of Lebanese Transparency Association. You may have noted that originally we had Monsieur Julien Courson planned, but unfortunately today in Lebanon, there has been an unfolding security situation which does not permit him to join us. So we're very pleased that Sarah could join us in this last minute kind of situation. So let me just very quickly just share my screen here. Sorry. Okay. So as I mentioned, we are both members of the Transparency International movement. This is a global civil society movement leading the fight against corruption. And we bring two perspectives, one as an independent national chapter, Lebanese Transparency Association, based in Lebanon, and one as the secretariat of the global movement, which is based in Berlin. And we've been trying to form a partnership based on trust, transparency, and equality that responds to the needs of those affected by the humanitarian and economic and financial crisis that have unfolded in Lebanon. And I think to start, it's useful to contextualize our partnership and to understand the partnership model that we have with our chapters in over 100 countries. So as you can see here, this is a bit of the governance structure of TI. You'll see that right now we have 97 chapters that are locally established and independent organizations that fight for corruption in their respective countries. Chapters are staffed with local experts, they're governed by their own board, and they determine their own priorities and approaches best suited to tackle corruption in their countries. Chapters don't depend on funding from TIS, and TIS does not receive regular funding from chapters, but we partner together for fundraising for many different aspects of partnership at the national, regional, and global level, where there are shared interests and where kind of an international voice from TIS can reinforce and amplify a localized response. As you can see, oh, that's okay. We'll just keep going then. As you can see, our highest decision-making body is our annual membership meeting, which is composed of our national chapters and a number of independent members. And this is our highest governing body, which supervises the work of the Secretariat. And the chapters have 2/3 of the voting power. And right now our board, among 11 members, 9 are active members of their local chapters. So as you can see, even in our governance structure, the Secretariat has a very strong level of accountability to its chapters, who collectively determine the priorities of the movement and also of TIS. But at the same time, TIS also acts as a connective tissue and institutional memory for the movement. And we conduct regular health checks with our chapters to ensure that they align with the principles, values, and standards set out by the movement. So this model for us really helps to keep the balance of power in check between the Secretariat and our chapters. And so to that, I'm going to pass along to my colleague, Sarah, to discuss about Lebanon specifically and how the context in which our partnership has evolved most recently. Sarah?
Thank you, Trang. Hello, everyone. First of all, I relay the apologies of LTA's Executive Director. So I'll be speaking on their behalf today. And I think today is a good example of the context that Lebanon has been going through for the past 2 years or so, and which also constituted a cornerstone for the partnership we've been building together with TI, with the Secretariat. So just to give you like the context in a nutshell, ever since the October protests in 2019, people went down to the streets and were asking for accountability and were accusing the state institutions and governments of corruption, lack of integrity, and so on. And that was very much portrayed in Lebanon's Corruption Perception Index results, where it ranked as 149th country, with a score of 25 over 100, which showcased a decrease from the past years and is a logical portrayal of what's been going on in the country, which has been suffering of systemic corruption for decades right now. So just a quick timeline. Following the protests, the situation in Lebanon on a socioeconomic and political level deteriorated in a very quick manner. We have been suffering from hyperinflation, the devaluation of our local currency, the decrease of our public debt, and which culminated, of course, within the umbrella of the COVID-19 pandemic, which really caused people to keep on falling into further socioeconomic challenges, and which outlined Lebanon on an international level as a spiraling state. And everything culminated eventually with the infamous Beirut port blast, which has really set the urgency on the Lebanese case and showcased how corruption can be one producer or cause for a humanitarian crisis. And this is why we at LTA consider that it is a man-made humanitarian crisis and that corruption played an essential role. And this whole series of crises kind of set out the tone for the need for Lebanon to kind of reconsider a lot of things. One of them, the role of civil society organizations within the country. Their responsibility got bigger with the quasi absence of state institutions, and with the further demand of the people for accountability and a place of trust. And that also was the vision of the international community that kind of also considered and started demanding for new models of partnerships that outline accountability, that outline a sort of stronger integrity, and that focuses on locally driven solutions. And this is kind of where, as the Lebanese chapter of Transparency International, and as also an autonomous organization, we kind of seized the moment along the Secretariat to not only build a partnership to bring in support to our organizational work within the context, but also to bring this certain novelty that was coming in at a time where even the international organizations were considering a new way and new approaches. And this is where, for the first time, the UN, the EU, and the World Bank, which are main actors as international actors within Lebanon, composed the 3RF, which is the Reform, Reconstruction, and Recovery Framework for Lebanon, which is as they call it, coming out from the needs and to the needs of the people, and which really echoes localization. And this is where LTA and TIS kind of anchored their partnership and started building what we're currently working on today. So that's a very quick intro into the context.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, Sarah, if you could just talk a bit about the role that LTA has played kind of in response to the crisis, and why was the transnational partnership important to support local responses?
Yes, first of all, LTA in particular is the first anti-corruption organization in Lebanon. So in the late 90s, when corruption was not really perceived as a problem and the country was reconstructing itself after 15 years of civil war, LTA came to bring in awareness and to play this role of a watchdog for anti-corruption. And then later on, when we became part of the TI movement, it gave us a certain even more credibility in order to, we're not only bringing in our own opinions as organization, but we're also bringing in the support of a movement that exists in more than 100 countries all around the globe. And within the context today in Lebanon, LTA has been actively being one of the leaders in asking for accountability and integrity since day one with all the crises that were taking place. and especially in terms of following the blast that happened last year on the 4th of August, where one of the core asks were that we need transparent and accountable investigations. And ironically enough, today, Lebanon is suffering one of the repercussions of this ask to kind of have an integrity-based investigation into the blast. And to have this transnational partnership within the Secretariat, not only did it make LTA's efforts kind of well supported in terms of expertise, of regional support, and also of global advocacy, but kind of made it more efficient. In other terms, the Secretariat at different stages came in as a facilitator of getting our voices heard on the international level, with the IMF, for example, among many other partners and organizations. It also given us the support in terms of communications. A lot of joint press releases were launched, and this even gave a bigger scale of what we were asking, because again, we're speaking for the whole, for Lebanon, and from a movement which showcases a kind of unity and solidarity behind what LTA is asking for. And today, in fact, LTA is sitting on the independent oversight board within the 3RF organigram, because actually the Independent Oversight Board Committee is responsible of rendering the international partners' work accountable, CSOs who are working with the 3RF or benefiting from any kind of support and grants accountable, and it also represents accountability towards the people and the primary beneficiaries of this whole framework, which is the Lebanese people. So we can say that through this partnership, this access to large-scale and sustainable funding, the technical assistance, and this international credible umbrella that this partnership has brought us today, LTA is leading on the forefronts of the fight against corruption in Lebanon.
Thanks, Sarah. I mean, I guess we wanted to share with you kind of some of the pillars of partnership that have been formed between TIS and LTA. And I think, you know, fundamentally what's most important for us are the principles. And they're, in order to build kind of that a partnership of trust, you know, having that mutual respect and open communication and integrity. And very much for TIS, recognizing and kind of internalizing the principle of localization and locally driven responses. This is, I mean, over time, this is a shift that we've also had to internalize in terms of how we do our programming, how we conduct advocacy, how we do our communications. All these elements have been in the process of evolution, you know, as we look even more deeper to be able to support our chapters in a meaningful way. And I think what worked well in the partnership between LTA and TIS was also a recognition of the comparative advantages that both parties had to bring to this partnership. You know, with LTA, obviously knowledge of the local context, local needs, access and influence and partnerships with local networks among authorities, civil society, academia, as well as strong reputation and credibility, and a strong kind of foundation of work that's already taking place and led by LTA. And I think on the other side with TIS, where we could come in to support, you know, was through some of our regional and global networks that we are already connected to, you know, whether it's through our advocacy, whether it's through fundraising, with the comms. I think those were different elements. And for TIS, as I mentioned before, we really act as an institutional memory and connective tissue. And there we've worked with LTA to try and also promote some of that peer-to-peer knowledge and exchange that exists across the movement. So not solely with TIS, but looking at different parts of the movement and how we can connect with one another to really join forces and support. And I think also in the context of some of the recent you know, fundraising successes that we've had jointly, it's also TIS coming in with its, you know, certain abilities to manage higher levels of risk, and particularly in a context for Lebanon, which is quite volatile, you know, economically and financially. I think that this was an important pillar for LTA to be able to focus and continue to deliver its programming on the ground. I think for us, we, as I mentioned, we negotiate power on the principles that we've outlined and a recognition and respect for the different roles that each partner can play. And I think at the end of the day, for us, whether it's with LTA or with other chapters, we continue to keep in mind that our value is more than the sum of our parts. Like if we join forces, we can really have, a strong impact. And we're really proud of what LTA has been able to accomplish and be as a leader to kind of advance the fight against corruption and promote accountability and transparency in Lebanon. So maybe just a few final words, Sarah, in terms of the results and learning of this partnership so far and the key takeaways from your end.
Yes, sorry, you might hear a bit of noise, but that's from the background, so sorry for that. Yes, thank you, Trang. I mean that this has been quite a learning experience for LTA and TIS with this new context in Lebanon that we kind of never have witnessed of that sort before. And such circumstances are bitter, but also bring in a chance for innovation and new concepts. And this is where a lot of learnings came in. From on the national level, LTA was able to kind of have the manpower needed and the support and the technical support that Trang just mentioned in order for us to be able to provide ideas and concepts to projectize our interventions in relatively a very fast manner in order to bring in the results and the support that we believe the Lebanese people need in terms of good governance, accountability, and transparency. And this has been really highlighted because we kind of learned how to capitalize on and maximize the strength of both an organization such as the Secretariat, but also how to kind of provide the needed support to bring in context relevant project. And this is what I think was one of the highlights of this partnership, is that not only have we brought in terms of fundraising projects for Lebanon and for LTA, but we also, these projects were developed on the ground and by the Lebanese team, and not only kind of thrown out from a high-level international lens. So one of the learnings were then that we need this support and this technical kind of outside eye that comes in with a critical sense and to help us kind of sharpen things out, but with having like a very strong and local core that is quite aware of the context and thus be able to provide concrete impact. And one of the things that I would like also to highlight was that through this partnership, we are now able to support and help citizens and victims of the port explosion and of the crisis overall within Beirut and outside of Beirut, like the capital, in a very concrete way. And this is through our legal and advice and advocacy centers. That is a global program and always supported by TIS across all chapters. And that currently is switching into new modes of intervention within Lebanon, having mobile units going out to the damaged areas that even if a year later are still very much damaged and very vulnerable to corruption and other forms of injustice. So we will be able to provide the support that is much needed. And of course, to keep on providing sustainable interventions and alongside the pool of expertise that exists within the Secretariat that can come in to support what we have already and still are building in Lebanon. So I think these are the main trends.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. I recognize that we should move on to our second case study, but yes, I will now pass the floor over to Ariana and Dalia.
Thanks very much, Trang, and hello, everyone. So Saferworld and Al Ayam will be sharing our experiences of implementing locally led peace building in Sudan. So just a quick introduction into who we are. Dalia works for Al Ayam, which was established in 2004 and works to contribute to overall reform, democratic transformation, governance, and development in Sudan. And Saferworld is an international peacebuilding organization. We work in over 10 countries across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. And just to say that we don't believe in implementing or delivering programs ourselves, but working alongside partners as we believe they're best placed to lead change efforts in their own context. So in terms of our partnership, we started working together in 2015. And just to give some background, in 2018, Saferworld held a number of internal reflection workshops, including with some of our longer term partners, to reflect on our existing community security and community peacebuilding models. We wanted to, and we also learned from others, including, for example, Local to Global Protection, who, by the way, have developed and compiled quite a lot of learning from various NGOs, working to implement community-led crisis response approaches as a means to really give survivors and groups and communities affected by crisis the power and resources to lead their own responses. So while all of our programming models were people-centered and focused on supporting locally led initiatives for peace, we really wanted to challenge ourselves to unpack the extent to which people and communities genuinely had the agency and ownership to design and also manage the resources to implement their own initiatives, or whether this could be taken a step further. So just to share a few main reflections that we took away, one was around the length of some of our inception periods. So Saferworld and its partners have, of course, supported some successful community-led initiatives. However, a key reflection was on the length of our prep phase. In many cases, we work with partners to conduct in-depth community security or conflict analysis prior to providing any direct support to community groups. And then, of course, following these assessments, we work closely with partners to support existing groups or support new ones and provide training and then eventually microgrants to support groups to implement their own action plans. So we reflected on the fact that we wanted to see where we could enable quicker, more timely resource to support community-led initiatives, particularly in active conflict and emergency settings. And in these settings, we wanted to look at how we could work with partners at also other approaches and tools without compromising on conflict sensitivity or losing out on aspects of the community security assessments that people find particularly helpful, particularly aspects that focus on asking communities to identify solutions themselves. We also wanted to look at how we could build more on existing capacities, recognizing that groups and CBOs in any context are the first to respond. While this is at the crux of our methodologies, we recognized that at times the emphasis on this aspect could be rushed or at times overlooked. And this is where we introduced what we called participatory action and learning approaches, or PALC, which prioritized more of an emphasis on rapid opportunity needs assessment, placing an emphasis on what exists and really leveraging the experience of our partners alongside regular spaces for learning and reflection. The other aspect we looked at is the use of flexible microgrants in order to give real agency, decision-making, and resources, as I said, to people affected by conflict. Again, all of our programs were designed to be community-led and did include a microgranting component, but we reflected on the fact that at times, unintentionally or not, some community ideas could be restricted by a set of internal criteria that we had perhaps designed. For example, wanting initiatives to be directly or explicitly linked to security and peace building. And this can, as I said, at times stifle creativity because of groups wanting to fit within Saferworld's perceived mandate. And also the funds were primarily still managed by our partners rather than the community groups themselves. So again, we wanted to look at how we could not only increase the level of microgranting going directly to community groups to lead their own initiatives, but also at how we could design a much more rapid, flexible microgranting methodology at a grassroots level in partnership with our national organizations, integrating key aspects of conflict sensitivity and strategies for addressing root causes. Naturally, this also led to important reflections within the partnership between Saferworld and Al Ayam, but also other partners we work with, so which I'll come back to at the end of the presentation. So in 2009, we started working with Sudanese civil society organizations, including Al Ayam, to co-design their own microgranting system, alongside the provision of demand-led training and participatory action and learning PALC approaches to mobilize communities to contribute to peace in Sudan, which I'll go on to now, onto the next slide. So what are the core components of a community-led crisis response? So one, as I referred to earlier, is participatory action and learning methodology, which is around supporting communities to rapidly initiate, strengthen, and sustain their own situational analysis with a focus on appreciative inquiry or opportunities assessment, as I mentioned earlier. So very much a focus on what exists, who's doing what, identifying locally relevant do no harm mechanisms and locally designed mechanisms for accountability, and supporting learning and information spaces for the groups themselves. Two is the provision of timely, responsive community microgrants to support collective action. Three, demand-led skills training. So the provision of rapid demand-led training and/or mentoring as identified by community initiatives themselves, which often included some basic financial and resource mobilization training or support. As I mentioned earlier, developing systems for real-time learning, connecting community-led initiatives with each other and with broader learning and influencing spaces. Coordination, particularly for protracted crisis, to support locally relevant mechanisms for improving coordination. And then, of course, given Saferworld and Al Ayam's focus on peace building and democratic governance, we proactively also seek opportunities for local groups to initiate and sustain transformative processes for tackling root causes of conflict and vulnerability. I'll hand over now to Dalia, who will talk through a few practical examples of putting this into practice in Sudan.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dalia from Al Ayam Center. And Al Ayam Center is a relation partnership with the Saferworld 16 to support 60 microgrant initiative during the Actors of Change program for 12 this program for more than 12 months because of pandemic of COVID. It's supposed to be only 18 months, but extended because of this closure happened during the breakdown of the pandemic. This initiative includes all participants from women, youth, elderly people, wide range of religions, ethnics, and others. So for us as Al Ayam, we see this program, PALC program is a program suitable for Sudan context, which is supporting those initiatives that action by citizens to contribute to wider process of peace, unity, freedom, and justice, which is the same slogan being raised up during December Revolution 2018 and up to now, of course. And those young people is presenting more than 65% of the population of Sudan, and those people go through the 30 years of authoritarian regime, have no skills, have even no good understanding for their own slogan. And looking for change, and need for change, very active. They need to include also those good governance principles with what you do. So the PALC is gives them opportunity for their participations, accountability, transparency, confidence, and skills. And there is two kind of examples I will be used here, and in different levels. One of them in the locality level, and the others go to national level. For this use for locality level, it's used is termed as tools or instruments for peace coexistence between four neighborhoods in Sudan Bahri city. And this the four neighborhood have split families because of those mother happened around 12 months ago. For mother happened, that means we have 4 inside the prison and we have other 4 inside the jail. And those young kids between 17 and under years old. And because of that, those closer neighborhood split families. And because of using these sport games, they build this relationship, gathering, bringing advantage for use advantage of education doses. This presented by this initiative during and after, and before the matches. This gives them the dosage on non-violence and how they can create kind of a social relation and also coexistence. And the outcome of this initiative, those neighborhoods reconcile, living now together, they can cross even the area peacefully, and this is not the case before. And then those who have now a good approach can be used for this kind of conflict issues, and do not dispute their families and go to wider resistant or resident for those neighborhoods. So in the front of you, this is a chart that we reconcile and signed by those youth, and as installment at least, and remind them always by how they can live in peace and coexistence with each other. The other example, this is for national level, and this is one of the initiatives have 2 kind of activity. One of them is supporting young students. Initiative is talk about the safe environment for universities for female students. One of them is just trained skill and quick young graduated and undergraduate students against harassment, and have more info about information about human rights and other good analysis. And this group succeed to advocate and go through a group campaign supporting 13 female students were being harassed by external examiner in Umbrella Hospital. By the way, these students are from medical. And the other one is about supporting and adopting discussions and lead consultation with different discipline people and experts on how they can to change and reduce administrative guides being used, sensitive being used by Ministry of Higher Education and Research in Sudan, with other line ministers and initially Britain to create safe environment for women in different area and dimension. This relationship and partnership with the civil world is including different kind of principles, and those principles, fortunately, the same principle being Al Ayam dealing with since establishment 2004. So these principles build in the local ownership, accountability, and building in existing capacity in this community, local community, and investing time for learning and reflection, those learning and uses this learning by Saferworld and even by Al Ayam Center and those communities. And this includes also inclusion, because as Sudanese we have different tribes, different ethnics, and we have issues related to gender and other injury. So this program always include everyone, try to include everyone involved, and this is we need this as tool for successful this relationship with the civil world. So this successful coming from first we have the same goal, objectives, and values, and this objective and values align with what PALC try to introduced. And also we have good communications and flexibility and responsiveness from our partner, Saferworld, and even with other partner, I mean, in the community. And also this partnership enable Al Ayam to have accessibility to everyone and have a within informal initiatives and individuals and groups. This in terms of daily work, it cannot be accessed. And also because of the safe space of the field being given by Saferworld, so that enable us to extend and continue working with those communities and learn from them and learn a lot regarding this and do our reflection on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dalia. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, implementing these approaches, of course, which we're all about looking at where decision-making and resources lie, naturally led to important conversations internally within Saferworld as an international organization around how we partner with local and national organizations, recognizing the power imbalance that exists. So I thought I would just end with a final 30 seconds on some of those reflections in case this also helps with other NGOs going through similar internal organizational change processes. So firstly, just to say, we've just launched our new 10-year strategy, and to inform that strategy, we consulted all 50, 60 of our partners to inform that 10-year strategy. So we asked our partners not just on questions around the direction of travel they thought we should be taking over the next 10 years, but how they thought we should be doing that. Where was our added value in the particular context, if any, and what were the values and principles that should underpin not just how we work, but the partnerships themselves. And this also led to a number of other organizational commitments, which we now will be monitoring as an organization. One is around the total transfer that goes to our local and national partner organizations. Two is around the joint development of budgets, ensuring that partners have adequate costs, not just to cover project and activity costs, but staffing. And this also includes introducing internally an overhead share policy with our partners. A commitment to explore diverse funding mechanisms to support a wider range of civil society, like the ones we've mentioned here today. A commitment to do more advocacy with partners instead of on behalf of, and really doing our part to facilitate access, recognizing, of course, that we have certain channels or access that our partners might not have as easy access to. And a commitment to really having accountability mechanisms in place that allow our partners to influence, again, not just what we do, but also how we do it. So really building in annual partnership reflection meetings and scrutinizing how the partnership should evolve over time. Yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Ariana and Dalia, for that really interesting presentation. And I think you ended off on a few really interesting notes in terms of what you're doing within your organization to kind of begin to make that shift, I guess, in awareness and engagement with your local partners. So now we'd like to engage all of you in a conversation. We'd like to do 2 breakout groups just to explore in greater depth some of the questions around critical success factors in transnational partnerships. So to that effect, Tylee, I think she'll be helping us kind of split into 2 groups, and the conversation will be, 20 minutes or so, but we have a number of questions that we just want to dig deeper with you and hear your own experiences, and yeah, also ask, if you have any questions for us based on our own experiences as well. Very happy to talk about that. So yeah, Tylee, if you could help split us up, that would be great. And then we'll move into the rooms.
Hi, welcome back.
We're all back.
We're all back, right, Trang? So welcome back, everyone. We just thought, at least for the next 10 minutes, it'd be really interesting to hear some of the key reflections from the two breakout groups. So I don't know if anyone would like to come in and share a main takeaway. Yeah, from the group discussion. So within our group, for example, we spent a lot of time talking about accountability. And I think where the emphasis is, and how, yes, we all, of course, need to be accountable to the funders or wherever, you know, the money is coming from, but how the balance is very much, you know, that is very critical, but also perhaps it's swung so much one way, and actually investing in some of the solutions that were presented today are actually smart risks, and that, you know, people do design local accountability mechanisms that work in their context. And so we were sharing various examples of how groups we've been working with have been doing that in practice. I don't know if others would also like to share any reflections.
I mean, maybe just quickly, from our group was relatively small, but but still, the time went by very quickly towards the end. I think one thing that was mentioned was with respect to the kind of strong partnerships that have been seen on the ground, is the visibility that is seen by the partners, you know, amongst the community of civil society actors, but also with donors, and having that kind of direct engagement is seen as important. I think on another front, we also talked a bit about kind of that, the kind of reiterating again kind of the positive partnership that has been created between Al Ayam and Saferworld, and, you know, different elements of the partnership that have been fostered, you know, whether it's through learning resources, whether it's through advocacy. So really a comprehensive partnership in looking not solely, you know, from a funding perspective, but all different elements of partnership that really create kind of strong and equitable and mutually kind of beneficial partnerships on that front. So it was just one thing. But yes, if there's anyone else who wants to add in, please feel free.
I mean, maybe I could take the opportunity to sort of flag some discussions that we've been having sort of in the knowledge platform among the consortium partners, because I think they're very related to the issues we've been discussing today, and sort of particularly picking up on the points Ariana was making about accountability. Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of the knowledge platform is what's called the sort of programmatic learning instrument. And essentially this is concerned with supporting and enabling learning in the sort of broad field of security and rule of law. And in sort of recent discussions about what this might look like, this so-called programmatic learning instrument, we started by discussing what are the barriers to learning by partner organizations. And unsurprisingly, we sort of homed in on the issue of power imbalances and the power imbalances that are implicit in the standard sort of donor NGO reporting and accountability systems, which, as we all know, you know, they tend to be fairly top-down, unidirectional, and they privilege donors and, to a lesser extent, international NGOs like Saferworld over national and subnational organizations. And I suppose our conclusion is that when you've got these systems of accountability in place, it squeezes out time, squeezes out space and resources, and also it squeezes out confidence for implementing partners to actually engage in real sort of innovation and learning. So we sort of confronted with this challenge of how can we, and I say we, this is again sort of thinking more broadly across the consortium partners of the knowledge platform, how can we create a space that enables and encourages implementing partners to be innovative, to build, or to sort of, you know, really develop the innovations that are ongoing, and what sort of incentives are needed to allow the learning priorities to be defined close to the ground. So what's sort of been bubbling up from these discussions, and nothing is sort of set in stone yet, but hopefully we will be sharing something about this in the coming months, But is the idea that this sort of learning instrument that's part of the knowledge platform, that it focuses on developing and in testing an alternative framework for reporting and accountability? And fundamentally, this would be, it would be based on dialogue rather than being based on written reports. So it's sort of a dialogue-based framework for reporting and accountability. And the idea would be to pilot this with 1 or 2 projects or implementing partners over the next year or so, with a view to developing an alternative reporting and accountability model. So I'm mentioning that in a way it's a sneak preview of what I hope will be sort of emerging out of the knowledge platform in the months to come. It's possible that actually we may take a different direction, but as I say, what we've been talking about today, and particularly with reference to accountability, it resonates very clearly, and I think for me it sort of vindicates our thinking about what would be a useful approach to take with this programmatic learning instrument. And I guess it might be interesting to hear from Erin, you know, what from the perspective, is Erin still with us? Yes. From the perspective of the MFA, you know, how you think that might work, this sort of dialogue-based model of accountability and reporting, because clearly that's quite a sort of a radical change from the standard accountability system and models that we use.
Yeah, of course. I've been thinking about the things you said as well, and reflecting. You know, oftentimes we really see the value of, you know, these frameworks and taking a different approach to also monitoring and evaluation, but we have, you know, other barriers such as our own transparency and accountability barriers, such as finance and our own frameworks that we oftentimes have to adhere to, and it's really a change in system that, you know, it required at all levels in order to make this, I think, for it to have sort of a sustainable change. It's something that I've experienced as well with managing programs. It's when, you know, when you hear these results and really that have come about through dialogue and narrative and really talking about weaknesses, challenges, making changes, that is the most valuable knowledge that we can gain. But when we go about our own accountability mechanisms, it's the match is often, there's often a mismatch, I would say. So I think it's there's definitely value in it. I think it's a very good point. But I think that a more system-wide change would be required in order to make that sustainable.
And I think that's true of international NGOs as well, not just maybe donors such as yourself. And I think this is something we've been reflecting on a lot is, yes, there's the accountability of the work, but also how, as an INGO community, are there also accountability mechanisms when it comes to the partnerships, and so I think this is something also in the UK, we've been joining various working groups, including within Bond, to go, okay, well, how as a UK NGO community, do we also develop core commitments that we're actually held accountable to when it comes to equitable partnerships? And how do you report back to partners on that as well, as opposed to it just being the other way around? So that people can see, okay, you are a good partner, you're not a good, you know what I mean? So it's very much skewed in one direction. And I think, and I think this is why also there's been such much slower progress on some things that are out there, like the Grand Bargain or Charter for Change, than many would have hoped. Is there needs to also be a meaningful roadmap on how organizations will actually monitor, report, and be accountable to those things they've signed up to.
Yeah, if I have a chance. Elena?
Dalia, please come in, yes.
Yeah, I want to highlight here maybe another dimension of accountability, which is something we learn about the downward accountability with the community's resource initiative. And this is built in through those kind of process of co-designing those activities with the community and highlighting by us to those communities. This is supposed to be to report back to their communities as they report back to us. So they use different tools and very nice tools like they publish their programs and money they have it on budget in the trees or in the club, public club, or use a WhatsApp or Facebook. So this is created by them, but I mean created by those users and those initiatives. So this is one of it is advantage of the past because of, as Sudanese 13 years ago with a certain regime, none of us can highlight accountability or talking about it. So now we start learning and then use about if we continue within these communities. So they start also highlight this issue even for their activity, not only for BAL. So they use it for others' activity in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks, Dalia. You're right. We've seen many creative ways in which the community initiatives have come up with their own accountability mechanisms to their wider communities in terms of how they use how the funds are being used. Great. Over to you, Trang. I think just to close us out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you everyone for joining us in this session. And you know, I think for myself, I mean, I've learned quite a bit listening to our partners, but also hearing all the different ideas and tools and approaches that are being tested to continue to build and work towards more equitable partnerships. And I know, you know, at TI, we are also reflecting on this in many aspects of our own approach and communication, as well as engagement. So it's been really valuable to have this conversation. And of course, this is only a small bit of a much bigger, wider conversation that's been happening all throughout this conference today, but beyond that as well. And we really hope that, you know, everyone here will remain engaged and continue to participate in these debates and discussions, and also reflect on what can be kind of done within your own organizations and partnerships as well. And yeah, I mean, for me, I'm very curious and interested to hear about Saferworld's that dialogue accountability mechanism that you're going to be testing. So hopefully we'll have a chance to continue to share and exchange and learn from one another. So thank you again, everyone, for your time. And we hope that you come away with a few new reflections from our conversation, and look forward to continuing this conversation with you in the future. Thanks again.